In the summer of 1942, two colossal armies collided in a city that would become synonymous with the brutality of World War II. The Battle of Stalingrad would rage for 5 months, consuming over 2 million lives and deciding the fate of nations. This is the story of the bloodiest battle in human history. The city sat on the western bank of the Volga River, a vital industrial center bearing the name of the Soviet dictator himself, Joseph Stalin. For Adolf Hitler, capturing Stalingrad meant more than strategic advantage. It meant destroying Soviet morale and securing the oil fields of the Caucasus. For Stalin, losing the city was unthinkable. He issued Order Number 227, not one step back. What followed was urban warfare at its most savage. Soldiers fought room to room, floor to floor, sometimes mere meters apart. The average life expectancy of a Soviet soldier arriving in Stalingrad was less than 24 hours. By the time winter arrived, the hunters would become the hunted, and the German Sixth Army would face annihilation. This is the Battle of Stalingrad, Operation Barbarossa, and the Eastern Front. On June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in military history. 3 million German soldiers, supported by over 600,000 troops from Axis allies, crashed into the Soviet Union along a front stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The initial German advance was devastating. Soviet forces, caught unprepared despite warnings, suffered catastrophic losses. Entire armies were encircled and destroyed. By December 1941, German forces stood at the gates of Moscow, but the Soviets held. The winter counteroffensive pushed the Wehrmacht back, and for the first time, Hitler's armies tasted defeat. Case Blue, Hitler's 1942 strategy. By spring 1942, Hitler needed a decisive victory. He launched Fall Blau, Case Blue, a massive offensive aimed at the oil fields of the Caucasus. The plan was ambitious. Army Group South would split into two, with Army Group A driving toward the Caucasus oil fields, and Army Group B protecting the northern flank along the Volga River. Stalingrad was initially a secondary objective, but as the summer campaign progressed, Hitler became obsessed with capturing the city, partly for its strategic value as a transportation hub, partly for its symbolic importance. Taking Stalin's city would be the ultimate propaganda victory. The German advance. General Friedrich Paulus commanded the German Sixth Army, one of the Wehrmacht's finest formations with over 250,000 men. Alongside them was the 4th Panzer Army under Hermann Hoth. Together, they drove eastward across the Don River steppes toward the Volga. Soviet resistance stiffened as German forces approached Stalingrad. The Soviet 62nd Army, under the command of General Vasily Chuikov, was ordered to defend the city at all costs. Chuikov was a tough, pragmatic commander who understood urban warfare. His philosophy was simple: hug the enemy. Stay so close to German positions that their superior artillery and air power couldn't be used without hitting their own troops. By August 23, 1942, German forces reached the Volga River north of Stalingrad. That same day, the Luftwaffe launched a devastating air raid on the city. Over 1,000 aircraft dropped bombs and incendiaries, creating a firestorm that killed an estimated 40,000 civilians. The city, once home to 400,000 people, became an inferno of rubble and smoke. Urban warfare begins. The German assault on Stalingrad proper began in early September 1942. What Paulus expected to be a quick victory turned into a nightmare. The Soviet defenders transformed every building, every factory, every pile of rubble into a fortress. The city stretched for nearly 30 miles along the Volga, but it was only 3 to 5 miles deep in most places. The Soviets held a narrow strip with their backs to the river. Every night, ferries crossed the Volga under fire, bringing fresh troops and supplies while evacuating the wounded. The river was their lifeline. General Chuikov established his headquarters in bunkers along the riverbank, often within artillery range of German positions. He insisted his commanders lead from the front. His tactics emphasized close-quarters combat, sniper warfare, and small unit actions. The Germans called it Rattenkrieg, the War of the Rats, the meat grinder. Fighting in Stalingrad defied all conventional military doctrine. Tank battles occurred at ranges of 20 meters. Soldiers threw grenades through windows and fought with knives and shovels in pitch-black basements. Buildings changed hands multiple times in a single day. The Soviets organized small assault groups of 8 to 10 men, combining riflemen, machine gunners, anti-tank rifles, and engineers with explosives. These groups would infiltrate German positions at night, attacking from unexpected angles. The Germans, trained for mobile warfare on open terrain, struggled with the chaos of urban combat. Snipers became legendary on both sides. Soviet marksman Vasily Zaitsev reportedly killed 225 Germans, including 11 enemy snipers. The duel between Zaitsev and a German sniper sent to kill him, possibly Heinz Thorwald, though historians debate his existence, became the stuff of legend. Whether myth or reality, it captured the personal, deadly nature of the fighting. Key locations. Certain locations became the focus of savage fighting. The Mamayev Kurgan, a hill in the center of the city, provided observation over the entire battlefield. Control of the hill meant controlling artillery fire. The Soviets and Germans fought over it for months. After the battle, Soviet authorities counted an average of 1,200 shell fragments per square meter of earth on the hill. The grain elevator near the river became another focal point. A small group of Soviet defenders held it for 5 days against repeated German assaults, fighting floor by floor until only a handful survived. The Red October Steel Factory, the Barricady Gun Factory, and the Dzerzhinsky Tractor Factory, Stalingrad's industrial complexes, became fortresses. Battles raged through workshop halls and foundries. Workers and soldiers fought side by side, sometimes repairing tanks even as combat raged around them. Pavlov's house. Perhaps no building symbolizes Stalingrad's defense more than Pavlov's house. Sergeant Yakov Pavlov led a small group of Soviet soldiers who fortified a 4-story apartment building in the city center. For 58 days, they held it against constant German attacks. The building overlooked a key square, giving the defenders fields of fire in multiple directions. They fortified windows with sandbags, laid mines around approaches, and dug tunnels to connect with nearby Soviet positions for resupply. The Germans threw everything at Pavlov's house: infantry assaults, tank attacks, artillery bombardment. It never fell. Chuikov later remarked that the Germans lost more men trying to take Pavlov's house than they lost taking Paris. September and October, the crisis. By mid-September, the situation for Soviet defenders was desperate. German forces pushed to the Volga in several places, splitting the 62nd Army into isolated pockets. Stalin sent urgent messages demanding the city be held. Reinforcements arrived, but casualties were staggering. Entire divisions were destroyed within days of arriving. On October 14th, the Germans launched their strongest assault yet. They concentrated massive forces against the factory district, attempting to break through to the Volga and annihilate the Soviet defenders. For 3 days, the fighting reached unimaginable intensity. German gains measured in meters. A Soviet division defending the tractor factory was reduced from 10,000 men to a few hundred. But they held. Barely. The Germans controlled 90% of the city, but that last 10%, narrow strips along the riverbank, remained in Soviet hands. And as October gave way to November, the weather changed. The autumn rains turned the steppes into mud, then frost hardened the ground. Winter was coming. Soviet planning, Operation Uranus. While the world focused on the grinding battle within Stalingrad, Soviet commanders were planning something ambitious. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, Stalin's most capable general, studied the German positions. The 6th Army's flanks, stretched along the Don River northwest and south of the city, were held by Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian troops, allies less well-equipped and motivated than German forces. Zhukov proposed Operation Uranus, a massive double envelopment. Soviet forces would break through the weak flanks and encircle the entire 6th Army in a giant pocket. Stalin approved the plan. Throughout October and November, the Soviets secretly massed over 1 million troops, 13,000 artillery pieces, 900 tanks, and 1,400 aircraft. The buildup was hidden through deception and careful movement. Reinforcements traveled only at night. Radio silence was maintained. The Germans suspected something but couldn't determine the scale or timing. The counteroffensive begins. On November 19, 1942, at 7:20 a.m., Soviet artillery opened fire. Over 3,500 guns unleashed a barrage on Romanian positions northwest of Stalingrad. An hour later, Soviet tanks and infantry crashed through the shattered defenses. The Romanian Third Army collapsed. Some units fought bravely, but they lacked adequate anti-tank weapons. Soviet mechanized corps poured through the gap, racing south toward the Don River crossings. The next day, November 20th, Soviet forces attacked south of Stalingrad. Again, the Romanian defenders broke under the assault. Two massive Soviet pincers were now driving toward each other, converging behind the German Sixth Army. The encirclement. On November 23rd, Soviet spearheads met near the town of Kalach-on-Don, about 60 miles west of Stalingrad. The trap snapped shut. The entire German Sixth Army, roughly 290,000 soldiers, was surrounded in a pocket measuring approximately 30 miles east to west and 25 miles north to south. Hitler's reaction was immediate and catastrophic. He ordered Paulus to hold Stalingrad and await relief. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, rashly promised that his aircraft could supply the trapped army by air, delivering 500 tons of supplies daily. It was a fantasy. The Luftwaffe never came close to meeting that quota. Weather, Soviet fighters, and anti-aircraft fire made flying treacherous. The most the airlift ever delivered was 300 tons in a day, and the average was far less. The Sixth Army needed 500 tons minimum to survive. They were starving. Operation Winter Storm. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein organized a relief effort. Operation Winter Storm launched on December 12th. Army Group Hoth, a newly formed armored force, would drive northeast toward Stalingrad, while Paulus attacked southwest to break out. For a few days, it seemed possible. Manstein's panzers smashed through Soviet defenses and advanced to within 30 miles of the pocket. But Paulus refused to attack without Hitler's explicit permission to abandon Stalingrad. Hitler refused. The moment passed. Soviet forces counterattacked, threatening Manstein's own supply lines. By December 23rd, the relief effort was abandoned. Army Group Hoth retreated. The Sixth Army was doomed. Christmas in the Kessel. The Germans called their pocket the Kessel, the cauldron. As December progressed, conditions deteriorated. Temperatures plunged to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Food rations were cut repeatedly. Horses were slaughtered for meat. Then soldiers began eating dogs, cats, and rats. Medicine ran out. Wounded men died from infections that would have been treatable. Frostbite claimed thousands. Men were too weak to bury the dead, so corpses piled up, frozen solid. Paulus sent desperate messages to Hitler, requesting permission to attempt a breakout. Hitler responded by promoting Paulus to field marshal and reminding him that no German field marshal had ever surrendered. The message was clear: fight to the death. The final Soviet assault. On January 8, 1943, Soviet forces offered surrender terms. Paulus, following Hitler's orders, rejected them. 2 days later, the Soviets launched Operation Ring, the final assault to destroy the pocket. Soviet artillery pounded German positions. Infantry and tanks advanced methodically, compressing the pocket from all sides. The Germans fought with the desperation of doomed men, but they had no chance. Many were too weak from starvation to resist effectively. By January 25th, the pocket was split in two. Soviet forces reached the Mamayev Kurgan and the Volga, cutting the remaining Germans into a northern and southern group. The end was days away. Surrender. On January 31st, the southern pocket surrendered. Paulus, now Field Marshal Paulus, was captured in his headquarters basement. Hitler was furious that Paulus had surrendered rather than commit suicide. The northern pocket held out for 2 more days before surrendering on February 2, 1943. The numbers are staggering. Of the approximately 290,000 German and Axis soldiers trapped in the pocket, 91,000 survived to surrender. Most were wounded, sick, or suffering from frostbite. The rest had died from combat, starvation, disease, or cold. But surrender was not salvation. The Soviets, themselves struggling with supply and organization, marched the prisoners east on foot. Many died during the forced marches. Of the 91,000 prisoners, only about 5,000 would ever return to Germany, many not until the 1950s. Soviet casualties were even more horrific. The Red Army lost an estimated 478,000 killed or missing and 650,000 wounded during the campaign. Total Axis deaths, including Germans, Romanians, Italians, and Hungarians, numbered around 400,000 killed. Combined, over 2 million people became casualties in and around Stalingrad. The aftermath. The Battle of Stalingrad was the turning point of the war on the Eastern Front. Germany's aura of invincibility was shattered. The Wehrmacht never fully recovered from the loss of the Sixth Army. The initiative passed permanently to the Soviet Union. The city itself was devastated. Over 90% of buildings were damaged or destroyed. Soviet authorities estimated 40,000 civilians died during the battle, though the true number may be higher. Reconstruction took years. For Stalin and the Soviet Union, Stalingrad became a symbol of heroic resistance. The city was renamed Volgograd in 1961 during de-Stalinization, but the battle retained its historical name, Stalingrad. On the Mamayev Kurgan, where so many thousands died, the Soviets later erected a massive memorial. The centerpiece is "The Motherland Calls," a towering statue of a woman holding a sword aloft, forever calling her children to defend the Rodina, the motherland. The Battle of Stalingrad demonstrated the terrible cost of totalitarian ambition. 2 dictators poured lives into a meat grinder for political symbolism and strategic gain. Hundreds of thousands of ordinary soldiers and civilians paid the price. But it also showed the limits of military conquest. Despite superior training, equipment, and tactical skill, the German Wehrmacht could not break the will of defenders fighting for survival. Urban warfare negated many technological advantages. Human endurance, in the end, proved decisive. Stalingrad was where Hitler's dream of empire began its collapse, where the tide of World War II turned, where the myth of German invincibility died in the frozen ruins of a city that refused to fall. This was Stalingrad, the bloodiest battle in human history, and the beginning of the end for the Third Reich.